There is so much that I want to say in my story, but I've got to realize what is my story and what is other people's story. And I feel like some things that I think are other people's story brings context to my story, but I'm not telling their story, I'm telling my story. And there is a whole lot more that I want to say. There's a whole lot that I would like to get into, but I'm not going to be able to, mostly because of legal reasons. But, you know, as I started this series, I wasn't really sure where it would go, and I really, I'm just like, do it and put it out there and, get started and just have it out there. And I didn't really realize where it was going to go, and I was very naive. I really didn't understand the impact that telling my story might have on other people. I do know that there's been many people that have told their story and it has burned me, and I've just been like, okay, I'll let it be. Because I always knew that there would be a time where I would tell my side. I would tell my story. And so I let them have their story for years, and I think that it's only fair that now I get my story. But whenever I'm telling my story, I don't want to hurt others. I do know that it's inevitable that a few people will get hurt in the telling of my story. It's gonna happen. I don't think that I can avoid that. I do think that I could have been more kind and open with what I was doing before doing it, but I was following the rules of do it, don't tell anyone what you're doing, do it, and then whenever they see that it's done, then y'all can talk about the fact that you did it, And I mean, my dad's always taught me it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And I've never really agreed with that. So it's kind of, I've got this tug of war going on within me, but I do know that I pray about this. I pray about it over and over again. I ask Spirit for signs, and like, I ask Spirit for signs where, if you want me to quit telling my testimony, then have this obvious thing that happens to me every day happen to me. But if you want me to keep on telling this, then please, have 3 birds fly over my head and call 4 times. And every single time, it's the thing that seems impossible happens to me that day. So I have to be like, I really feel called and led to continue. And I am so sorry to those that I hurt in my story. It is not my intention. And also because of that, I do understand that I cannot be as honest as I want to be. I'm going to have to change some things up. I will have to change names. I'll have to change places. I'll have to change some details around. Because if I was honest, it could hurt people. And the ways that our laws are set up to protect criminals too. And I could get in trouble for a heinous crime that was done to me because I didn't report it properly back then. And I could get in trouble for a heinous crime that was done to me, and the perpetrator can get away with it fully because I decided to speak up. So I've got to be very careful. I've got to walk a fine line with this. And I need to understand that this is my story. I'm going to tell it from my perspective. But it cannot be a nonfiction story from here on out. It's got to be fictional. So I will tell my story as a fiction. This is just a story. And I hope that you guys can get it. So, looking back, a lot happened the last half of my 11th grade year. Like, wow, I went to this rinky-dink school. I ended up going to another school. I was living with my best friend, and then I was living with another best friend, and then I'm homeless. But I did make cheerleading. So at the end of my 11th grade year, I was a cheerleader, and I was homeless. So we would have cheer practice, and I would walk to the school to go to cheer practice and have to walk back home, I guess you could say. I would walk to Zach's home because, like I said, this boy, he was gorgeous. He looked like he had morals and values to me. I thought that he was a good boy, and I just, I just knew that we were meant to be together and that somehow we're going to be together. So I would spend a lot of time at his house, a lot of time at his house. And I just remember, running from cheer practice to his house and just enjoying life, So during this time, I am very, very naive. And as y'all know, that whenever my cousin died, I kind of swore off God. Even though at all times God has been in my heart and I love God, I was mad at him, but I still loved him and I didn't want to completely depart. I did for a while. I did just say, F God, F spirituality. I'm just going to whatever, do whatever drugs I can to enjoy my life, really, Yeah. So I was getting further away from God, but it was Zach and being at his house. His mother was an inspiration to me. She had raised many children, and she'd even adopted a child. And yeah, she was an inspiration to me, and she smoked cigarettes, but she would sit there smoking her cigarette and reading her Bible. And she would tell us about stuff in the Bible, like Zach and his brothers and stuff. She'd be like, that the Bible says, you don't need to be still, or, that's irrelevant. But anyway, yeah. So she would be telling us about the Bible and teaching the kids. And Zach had a couple friends that had just gotten back into their church. And it was the church that he grew up with. And so he was like, we should go. We should go with them to this church. And I was like, yeah. And because his mother was a smoker, because I was a hardcore smoker, I smoked cigarettes and I was a pothead, and any drugs I could get my hands on, I would be doing. I would put alcohol in my Dr. Pepper bottles, or back in the day we had Fruitopia, so I put vodka in my Fruitopias and drink it during school, any way that I could get out of my mind, I wanted out. So yeah, at this time, yeah, I was a heavy smoker, and the fact that she could pray to God, she could love God, and she could still read the Bible and still be devout to God and be a smoker was inspirational to me. It showed me that I didn't have to cut God off just because I smoke, if that made sense. And so I started going to this church, and it was not like a church that I was used to going to. This was a Pentecostal church, and at this church, they get into it. They get into it big time. Dancing and singing and everything. And yeah, they spoke in tongues, and they would preach in tongues, and they did the laying on hands, they would lay their hands and people would go crazy in the aisle. And this is just a little rinky-dink church, y'all. This is not like no mega church. This is like a little bitty rinky-dink church in this little bitty rinky-dink town. It wasn't that big. And, they were doing all this stuff, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I've got to dedicate my life to God. I've got to rededicate my life to God. And I knew that I would never not be a smoker. And so I went up to the altar and I prayed my prayer, and I prayed it in my heart. No one heard me pray my prayer, but it was, oh God, please forgive me for hating you and for not understanding you. Please forgive me for being a slut and a hoe. Please forgive me for, I want to, I'm going to be honest with you, God. I want to ask forgiveness for my smoking and my drug use, but I know that I'm going to keep on doing it. So please just watch over me, love me, and protect me, and guide me in my life, even though I am a sinner. I'm an active sinner. And all that I want is to be with you, God. And I promise you that if you take me back, I will rededicate my virginity to you. I will go back to virgin status, and I will not sleep with another boy until I am married. because I felt like that was important, you know, like I'm past the drugs. Drugs will keep you from God. Like, I'm okay with doing drugs and God, but I'm not okay with sex at this point in my life. And so I promised him that I would not have sex. You know, I'd only had sex with 3 boys, not counting the gang rape. And so I was like, I'm going to go back to virgin and I'm going to be, you know, a good girl. And I was rededicating my life to God. And we started going on the weekends. And I began to speak in tongues. They did lay their hands on me and everything. And, you know, everybody knew that I rededicated my life to, like, well, they didn't know it was a rededication. They thought that I was coming to God for the first time. So they were all happy. You know, I just got saved. So I got all that attention of the just got saved. And yay, you're saved. Yay. And then, yeah, I ended up, I spoke in tongues, you know. I just let it go. So yeah, I can speak in tongues. I've been anointed in that way. I don't know what that means. It just sounds like gibberish to me. We'll get into that later. But at this time of my life, I felt anointed by the Holy Spirit. I was brand new and I was ready to be the best that I could be. I was in cheerleading and everything was going great except for my naivety. Because, like I said, I was mostly homeless. I would stay the night with my friends here and there whenever I could, and then I would sleep in the park. Well, Zach lived right by the park that I would sleep in often. And so he would let me come into his house often. And I would sleep on their couch quite often. And one night, while I was at Zach's house, I woke up in the middle of the night to, I mean, honestly, we both fell asleep on that couch together. There were many times that we made out on that couch. We'd been together for a couple months, boyfriend, girlfriend. But I woke up to him having sex with me. And it kind of threw me off. I went into freeze mode with this one. All I could think was, you just broke another promise to God. You were going to be better, and now look at you. Now look at you. And so I don't know. I didn't say nothing to no one the next day, and the next time we went to church, the way that I thought that I could make it right to God, because here I am breaking another promise to him. I promised him I wouldn't do this, but I've done it. The way to make it right is to promise God to marry Zach, to be fully dedicated to Zach, no matter what. Be there for him. So I promised God that I would be loyal and dedicated, and I would be by Zach's side until he married me. So that was my promise. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of my story. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you more than you know. Thank you. And as always, be blessed with love. That's all she got.